Hi, I'm Byna Elliott, Head of Advancing Black Pathways at JPMorgan Chase. And I'm happy to be with you today to discuss a critical topic for our community, which is access to capital for Black entrepreneurs. These two panelists that I'm going to interview today are near and dear to me. Ken Kelly, who's the chairman and CEO of First Independence Bank, is joining us, as well as Arian Simone, who's the co-founder of the Fearless Fund. First Independence happens to be the second gig I had out of college. And I can remember walking in those doors at 27 years old, bright-eyed and full of vigor and enthusiasm around making a difference in our community, and knowing that First Independence as a minority depository institution would be part of that journey for me, and knowing that I can make a difference in creating access to capital. Arian happens to be my homegirl from Detroit, and also part of my alma mater of Cass Technical High School out in Detroit, Michigan. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having us.
I'm excited to be having this discussion with you all. These two people on this panel are part of the solution. They're not just staring at the issue and admiring the problem. They're changing the paradigm, they're engaged, and they're driving meaningful change. And they're great partners with JPMorgan Chase. They're part of our $30 billion commitment that we made last October around driving and closing the racial equity gap. I want to frame up the issues around our Black-owned business. And the reality is that, as we know, Black-owned businesses have been dead last in most stats, whether it's most founded but least funded, least amount of employees, and the least amount of revenue. So the first question I'll leave with you, Ken.
Certainly.
The problem that we're working to solve in creating better access to capital for Black entrepreneurs is well documented. I just laid out a couple of the facts. How have you approached the problem at First Independence?
Byna, let me say thank you so much for having us. You and your team at Chase have been great partners of ours, from Jamie Dimon to Jason Tinsley, Peter Scher, and of course under your leadership. And we just want to say thank you for that. I will tell you, when you think about access to capital, it is one of the biggest challenges that we have in this country. If you think about it in very simple terms, in a capitalistic society, money is the oxygen. And we have found, just as you just made reference to, that there's a lack of oxygen in our community. And so we're looking forward to working with Arian and also our team members in figuring out how can we lower the barriers and allow businesses to have access to capital. There is a tremendous stack when you think about the capital stack, from our friends and family to credit cards to venture capital to mezzanine capital to getting to the banking system. And oftentimes, from an education perspective, we think of going directly to the banks. And so it is our role to talk more about that and make it easier for individuals to grow in that capital stack, such that when they come to a bank, they won't feel depleted or deflated because they got turned down.
Exactly. I'm so excited you're talking about the capital stack, because Arian plays a critical role in that capital stack representing VC capital. Arian, we know that Black women today are more likely than white men to start a business, but are far less likely to have and receive funding, either from banks or even VC capital. How did this inspire you and motivate you to launch the Fearless Fund?
Oh my gosh, Byna, you said it best when you said we are most founded but least funded, and that is true. Black women in particular right now receive 0.0006% of venture funds. And while that is definitely alarming and definitely discouraging, and it needs to change, I was motivated by this mission as a college student at Florida A&M University when I was raising capital for my mall-based retail store. I ended up raising about a couple $100,000 to open up this 2,500 square foot space. And as I began the process of pitching and raising funds, there were very few people for me to pitch to who even looked like me. And I said, you know what, Arian, don't you get upset. Right before we had cut the ribbon at the grand opening, I was sitting on the floor and I said, one day you will be the business investor that you were looking for. So I was motivated by my own personal experience to start the Fearless Fund, a venture capital fund that invests in women of color businesses, pre-seed, seed, series A, early stage. So I guess you say I am my customer. So it was my own personal journey that led me to this place.
You put a tremendous vision to work. So when you think about that around venture funding and how it's been traditionally difficult for us to navigate the space, what do you think is important for our Black entrepreneurs and how they should capitalize on venture capital?
I would even say right now, while there is an awareness of racial equity, and while a lot of corporations are paying attention to this space, I pray that this is not just a moment in time, but it is a consistent movement upward and onward. And if you are African American and you are raising right now, this is your time. There are more corporations probably right now paying attention to this space than any other time in prior times. So I would say make sure that you show up and show out. There are two key things that any investor, of course, is looking for to get somebody's attention. You need a great brand story and great traction in the marketplace. From there, of course, people are going to expect you to have your docs in order, your corporate governance in order, your numbers in order, your P&Ls in order. But to grab somebody's attention, I would encourage every entrepreneur who is listening right now, make sure that you hone in on your pitch, have an amazing brand story, and be able to show proven traction in the marketplace.
Pitch, brand story, and traction in the marketplace. You guys heard that. Make sure you're taking notes because they're dropping gems. Ken, when you think about the fact that some viewers, I talked about my experience at a minority depository institution, First Independence Bank. So I know a lot about MDIs, but when you think about others, some people don't recognize that term. Why do you think these institutions are so vital to our communities of color? And how do they differ from traditional banks?
Well, Byna, it goes to the fundamental question. I can be what I can see, right? I'm one of the members of the 100 Black Men of Atlanta. And we talk about that from a mentoring perspective, but I think it characterizes how we live our lives. And so it's important that individuals like myself and Arian, who are in the financial field, are there visible for kids to see us as examples and role models. One of my heroes was Reginald Lewis. I got his book right over there on the shelf. And there's not a day that I don't think about him when I'm thinking about big business ideas that, it allows me to kind of take that fuel and move forward. And the point I'm making is that when you think about MDIs, which is your original question, we represent the beacons of hope in a capitalistic society for our culture. And while there are only 18 of us left in this country out of 5,000, we still are representing. And so the intent is we've got to do a better job of being sure that kids see that the financial business and the financial space can be, quote, smart and sexy, and be sure that we are participating, not just being the recipients and being reactive, but being proactive in how we bring financing into the market. Arian's story is a beautiful story. She said, I needed money first, and now I learned how to get money. Now I know how to give money. And so I think we need to do things like that, have examples like that in forums like this so that individuals can see an Arian doing extremely well representing Florida A&M University. By the way, my daughter is a White House Scholar there this year.
Excellent. All these threads of connectivity, I really appreciate it. Arian, if we shift gears for a moment, while we know capital has been relatively good space for entrepreneurs as of late, as you talked about, through the first half of 2021, Black founders have raised about $1.8 billion, which is more than 4 times the amount raised in the same time frame last year. We know that's still a fraction of what's needed. What do you think is a driving force of this? And do you think the momentum will last?
Whew. That's what I touched on briefly earlier. I do pray that this is not a moment in time, that this is truly a movement that will continue on. A lot of the driving force of that has been to the COVID-19 pandemic. People were forced to be still and stay at home while police brutality and a lot of racial reckoning was taking place in 2020 that had the world's attention. And from that, people realized, okay, we really do not live in an equitable world, which we haven't for quite some time. And they were trying to figure out solutions on how do I participate in getting this place to be more equitable. And racial equity became a priority for a lot of institutions. And that's why we see that reflection in those numbers. But like you said, it's still a fraction, still a long way to go. It's going to take billions and trillions to move those percents that I mentioned earlier. And no, I'm encouraged that this is not just a moment in time. I work in this space. I'm dedicated to this cause and this mission, but it's going to take the discussion and the dialogues that we're having today, even with Black enterprise, to keep going, to say, you know what, more is still needed. Progress is being made, but more is definitely still needed.
And as part of this, we talked about the moment versus a movement. Is there any other advice you want to add or lean in and ask your institutional investors about? Because we need to all collectively make sure this is not just a moment, but a movement. We all have to lean in and use our voices, our talent, our experience, our relationships to make sure that funds like the Fearless Fund continue to grow. You just had a really big moment. We were in Atlanta just about a week ago where we got to celebrate you and your sort of another milestone in your organization with your co-founder. Talk to me about that and what you expect ways that we can help you as institutional investors.
Oh my gosh, we recently had our Fearless Venture Capital Week. We were celebrating, thank you. We were celebrating Black Business Month, and we designed a 7-day multi-generational event as a give back, a free event to our community. So on Monday, we educated kids actually in venture capital. Then on Tuesday, we educated teens. And then our HBCU day at Clark Atlanta University on Wednesday. And then one day that I will say that was definitely of importance was our Investors Day. And the reasons why it was so important, because our industry right now is 80% white male. So this is to tie into what you were asking about what the institutional investors could be doing. 80% white male. So Kenneth touched on it a little bit earlier when he was talking about we need to see more people who look like us cutting checks. Mm-hmm. The industry is 80% white male. And for me, this was not about convincing the 80% to invest in people of color, though I think you should because it's profitable. It was about creating more Black and brown check cutters in order to invest and diversify what the investments look like. So with that being said, we are still far and few between. We still need definitely more capital. This for us was just like she said, a milestone of Fund 1. We will be in market even next year for Fund 2. We have to keep growing on this journey. We currently run a $25 million fund. That's not putting a dent in 0.0006%. We need 100, we need 500, we need $1 billion, and we have to keep growing. Again, the industry is 80% white male. We need more African Americans becoming check cutters to make it sexy and relevant, as Kenneth said as well too. And I pray that the attention that the Fearless Fund has gotten with our movement is inspiring a new class of investors that are interested in this.
We see it. Until one, I want to congratulate you. I had a chance to join you, and I was moved and excited about the work that you've been doing, the vision you've created, and the place that you're making for others to join us. Ken, you've also had an exciting moment. First Independence just announced last week that it will open its first location in Minneapolis this fall. What drove your decision-making to enter this market?
Well, Byna, that's a great question. It's a lot like life is serendipity in terms of how things happen. I couldn't have told you a year ago, let me say 2 years ago, we would have planned this. But the reality is based on relationships we had cultivated over time, going back several years. I mean, actually bidding on business together, not just knowing someone. It cultivated in a conversation of what could we do? And that conversation ended up having 6 people around the table. It was the Fab Five and our bank. And by the way, they named themselves the Fab Five because we're from Michigan. And the bottom line is we said we were going to do something transformative. We were going to do something very different. And there was agreement around the table that us coming into that market, being invited by 5 of your competitors to come into a market was one that we saw individuals put their labels at the door and say, this is for the betterment of the community. And so we're so proud to be a part of that. We did file our application recently, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to open the doors there sometime later this year.
How do you envision that benefiting the Black entrepreneurs in Minneapolis specifically, Ken?
Well, I made reference to this. It's about hope. And I will tell you, I have had an unprecedented number of calls from individuals from Minneapolis saying, you don't know how much this means to us. As you know, that city went through a trial last year and the earlier part of this year that has been really unprecedented to see individuals really move in the right direction because of the way they saw George Floyd murdered. And what I would say to you is, while we're not going to be the solution, we want to be a part of the solution and show that there are people who can work collaboratively together and work for a good cause. And so I'll be there, in fact, next week for the full week, meeting with a lot of individuals on the ground. I've spent time there in incognito prior to, but the intent is we're going to get out now this time and have our feet on the pavement, talking to the individuals that we're hopeful that we're going to impact, small businesses, and small entrepreneurs.
Well, having known that the work that you all do in Detroit, I'm excited for Minneapolis to have an anchored or institution like First Independence to be in the market because you make a difference in Detroit every day. So I know you'll do the same for Minneapolis. So when you think about, Ken and Arian, when you think about the Fearless Fund and First Independence Bank, which is a traditional financial institution, and you talked, Ken, a little bit earlier around the capital stack, how each one of those components of a capital stack really make a difference as you're thinking about how you grow your business, identify the right set of resources at the right time for your business. I love to pull that thread. Arian, when you think about venture capital and the kind of clients that would need venture capital, walk us through sort of the main ingredients or components of when a company should be looking for venture capital.
That I'm glad you said that, because though there's a lack of access to capital overall, everybody does not need venture funds. That is so true. So what I mean by that is venture-backed companies are usually companies that are going to scale and grow very quickly. The average time of a fund cycle in the venture industry is 10 years. So we are looking at companies that can have a very large exit in a very short time frame. So say if a company comes to us and they're more than happy being the mom and pop shop, they're more than happy with just making $5 million a year, but they need assistance with cash flow, which is the number one pain point in being a small business owner. That's somebody who I would say, you know what, Ken, if this person needs debt-based financing, they are consistent, their books are in order, but this is not the area of funding that they would probably be needing. And that's just the truth of it. There's, like they said, there's so much in the capital stack and there's so much that you do need in order to function as a business owner, but not everybody fits the venture profile, quote unquote. And when that happens, we definitely do refer them out.
Kenneth, when you think about First Independence, which is a traditional bank, plus it's also a community development financial institution certification, think about those two different engines you have, a CDFI and an MDI. What do you think the needs are and how you address the small business needs through your MDI and your CDFI? A lot of acronyms, you guys, and I apologize for that in advance.
Certainly, Byna, I would tell you they're just part of our value system. And one, she mentioned CDFI, that's Community Development Financial Institution, and MDI is Minority Depository Institution. And we live both of those as part of our value system. But what I would tell you, even in our partnership with you, Byna, there at Chase, what it allows us to do as an institution is really spread our diversification. One of the challenges that you can study if you look at MDIs, Minority Depository Institutions, is that they kind of focus directly in the neighborhoods that they serve. And what happens is when we get a cold in America, those economies catch the flu. We've all heard that metaphor. And so what the result of that has been, many of our banks have seen their demise because of it. What we're trying to do now is figure out how to really diversify our model through partnerships with Chase and many of the other institutions in a way that they're now investing in our banks, but also there's a relationship that we can do business together, such that when there is a downturn in the economy, if I am focused and concentrated in a LMI, low and moderate income area, it doesn't impact me as an institution as harsh. And so the relationships that we are forming now, I think, will pay dividends for our institutions, not episodic, but systemically over the long period of time. And so it's an approach that we're taking that's a little bit different in the past. And so I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you and the Chase team.
Thank you, Ken.
Can I add something, Byna?
Of course.
Because I know my question wasn't as relationship driven, but I definitely wanted to hone in, of course, on the relationships, just even on this panel, as well as what this looks like for us as an institution. So when we were talking about, and I know Kenneth was heavily about just your relationship with your banker, just on a small business to banker level. As a VC, we have these same relationships that we, of course, have to nurture and maintain as well. Chase is definitely an institutional, JPMorgan Chase is an institutional investor in the Fearless Fund at a multi-million-dollar level. And so that we are definitely grateful for. In addition to that, like you said, Advancing Black Pathways have definitely come on board to partner on our activations and our events to educate our community. In addition to that, this is just very serendipity and full circle. First Independence Bank, that's one of my first bank accounts. literally, I'm a Detroit, Michigan, born and raised woman. And I remember taking my high school checks and depositing them at First Independence Bank. Yes. So all of the connections here, you want to nurture all of these relationships because you just never know where they're going to show up later in life for you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've got one last question, Arian, for you. And that's like, well, let's pull the thread on the Fearless Week that you just celebrated. Part of that was a ton of pitch competitions. And you talked about the need to know your product, to be able to share your story and really pull the thread around your business model. And you were able to award several thousands of dollars over the week to young people and adults around being able to clarify that pitch and tell their story. Give us a great example of one of the pitches and why you guys funded it last week.
Oh, gosh. I'm trying to think because we had so many, and we even had a surprise one. So though our thesis is centered around women of color, on our nonprofit entity, we are able to award at different age levels as well as both sexes. So if it could have been a Black male-led business as well too. And actually, that's what I'm probably going to talk about just a little bit, that we actually had a surprise. But the reason why we chose to do this multi-generational, I needed to know what a 7-year-old knew what it felt like to have access to capital.
Nice.
I needed them to know that. I needed a teenager to know what it felt like to have access to capital. I needed a college student, as in myself, I was a college student, and that was on JPMorgan Chase's day, to know what it felt like to have access to capital. So for me, that was important for them to get that as part of their norm from childhood on up. And one of the companies, they were not as famous cookie company as the name to it. And we awarded him, it was a Black male-led company, a $10,000 grant. We awarded over the week over $150,000 in business grants at various age levels. But he gave his story of how the business is doing well, numbers are great, all of that is intact. But he said he had a 401k, he had a high credit score, well over 700. He was giving all of his personal stats, but when it came time for him to go get a business loan, he was continuously rejected. And he said, how is this that I've been this financially responsible, this credible, but yet there's so much bias in this space for you to tell me no? And I said, whew. I said, this is why we're in the space that we do what we do. So I'm not sure if that's the story, of course, you were looking for in something like this, but I wanted to show how we're making a difference in this space and access to capital. And over 50% of Black businesses had to close their doors to the pandemic, and 10,000, 20,000, we did up to even 50,000 in grants that week, make a pivotal and very instrumental difference in someone's business.
That's exactly the story we did want to hear, because that's exactly why you guys are on this panel, because without you all in the seats that you're in, leading in, challenging, and creating a movement, not a moment, but a movement, we wouldn't be here. And we need those kind of people to be able to see us and know that we are just as committed and energetic and focused on them having their story told and them being able to have the capital they need to grow their business. So I'm glad that you were able to do that and award him a small grant towards a seed towards his business. And I'm also glad that Ken's on the line, because as a significant deposit, leader, MDI leader at First Independence, he every day hears those stories and says, I see you and we can make a difference. Yeah. And so glad that he's in Minneapolis, glad that he's in Detroit, and we might have First Independence on a bunch of other corners in the near future. Right, Ken?
Absolutely, Byna. And there is one other topic I think I want to lean back into that you mentioned earlier, and it's about the time frame we're in. I'm a student of history, and the reality is these moments kind of cycle, they come and go. And we do need to do, as Arian said, make this more a movement. But I've used two words. One, we don't want this to be episodic. We want it to be systemic, a systemic change. But we saw this in the 70s. We saw this in the 1920s. And the time is that we've got to make a strategic shift here on these topics. And I think Black enterprise, which has been a cornerstone of Black business across this country, And I say that when I used to have to go to the barbershop to get the magazine, right?
Absolutely.
Black enterprise has been there for us, and we've got to support these institutions that have allowed our culture to continue to kind of thrive going forward. And the way we do that is to talk about these topics routinely, systemically going forward, to not have this be episodic, to make it a movement, to make it part of our consciousness, to make it part of our culture. And so I will commit to do that, and joining you and Arian, and being sure that we not only let this be a moment in time 3, 4, 5 years from now, like it typically has shown in history, but we need to be doing this 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, such that 1, 2, 3 generations can feel the impact of this.
Arian, can you talk about, if I was interested in considering venture capital as a source of funding, you all do provide a credible amount of technical assistance and education for those individuals who are thinking about venture capital as a potential way to finance their business or grow their business. Give us just a plug on how we can access the education you offer through the Fearless Fund Foundation.
Most definitely. And I know, Byna, when you were sitting there the other day, you were like, whoa, this is awesome.
Sign me up.
We run a program called Get Venture Ready. And in Get Venture Ready, we have monthly master classes. You guys can go to fearless.fund is the website. And it is just that, GVR. We have monthly master classes on corporate governance, on product market fit. We get you fully prepared. Right now, we're educating a little bit over 1,000 women of color founders in this program. And it's awesome, from pitch workshops to making sure your pitch deck is right. And I can honestly say, based upon not just the testimonials, but the proof, our girls have been kicking butt. They have been winning the pitch competitions. They always show up in the next meeting like, I won this one, I won that one. All the big pitch competitions that are taking place, these women have come out of our programs. I've been so proud to see that the education that they are receiving is monetizing for them. I'm like, yes, this is awesome. But yes, that's our program called Get Venture Ready. And it's amazing. It truly is amazing. We have special guest teachers every single month that are truly there for the students.
Excited. Get Venture Ready. First Independence now in Minneapolis, and maybe even more communities. Ken, the last question is going to be for you. What's your advice to a small business owner who's listening today on how to succeed in getting working capital from a bank? And when you think about that, not only about the working capital, what are the steps they need to take, and where do they typically go wrong? So how do you help them with some missteps?
To try to distill this to a very simple response, here's what I would say is not be afraid to ask questions. I think in our community, there's a stigma. We've been taught you got to do it on your own and, go full forward in a manner that sometimes causes us not to ask the right questions of people who are around us. So be collaborative is what I'm trying to say in terms of learning, because that's one of the gaps we have from a cultural perspective. The second thing I would say is be just unwavering in your mission. Be willing to accept no more than you can handle, to be candid with you. And that means that you're going to be told no many times. I heard Bakari Sellers say he was turned down 32 times on his book. I've written one and I'm going to self-publish. So that tells you my thermometer for being turned down maybe is not as high. But the point I'm making is that when you're committed to a mission, you have to be committed to it. And people will see that fire in your gut, your desire to really do it, and will help you along the way. And so as you think about, and as we think about those individuals who are sometimes that make it across the finish line and don't, sometimes it's just that dexterity and the tenacity to say, you know what, I'm not going to let this deter me from my end goal. And what will happen is you'll find yourself making a way out of no way in such a way that, guess what, the bank will come to you when you get to being successful. And a lot of times we know that this is true, which is banks have a tendency to lend money to people who don't need it and not lend to the people who really need it. And so in making that transformation and making that transition sometimes is extremely difficult. But I will tell you, most importantly, what we learned last year in dealing with PPP, you need to have a relationship with a banker. I don't care if it's but one person in the bank branch who know you by name and know that you're consistently there. Be sure that you have a relationship with a banker. And I will say that to all of our culture, because it certainly helped out last year for those who had relationships in the midst of PPP. And so I would say to you, be sure you have a relationship with the banker.
Great answer, Ken. I just actually had a person email me and say, I'm opening up a business bank account. I said, open up the account, but do not just walk in there and meet with the teller. Introduce yourself to the branch manager. Introduce yourself to the platform staff, and make sure they're part of your team and part of your advisory team as you grow and develop your banking relationship. So you're absolutely right. Relationships do matter. And so this is our time today. And I really want to thank you both, Ken and Arian, for giving us your time and your insights. And if you're an entrepreneur that's looking to learn more about resources that Chase has to offer, visit our Advancing Black Entrepreneurs website at jpmorganchase.com/ABE. We pull together tools, advice, and entrepreneurship education to help you grow and scale your business. You can also learn more about Advancing Black Pathways, which is our strategy for helping help close the racial equity gap at jpmorganchase.com/ABP. Thank you and take care.